Hello and welcome to the second episode of Naval Boot Camp. I am Xarkun and this is World of Warships Legends. Today we're going to be continuing on from part 1 in this series to finish up on the beginner tips for playing battleships, and we're featuring the Tier 4 Russian battleship Pyotr the Great. In the last video we covered how to stay alive. We talked about angling, avoiding torpedoes, and a little bit about overmatch mechanics. In this video, we're going to talk about map awareness and target selection. But before we get into the gameplay, we're going to note that my Pyotr the Great is fully upgraded. As you can see, I've got all the upgrades installed, and I've got Aiming Systems Mod 1 in the first mod slot there. That makes the guns a little bit more accurate by tightening up the dispersion. The commander at the helm is Nikolai von Essen. This is the commander I used in the first part of this series on the Ganget. Very basic battleship commander build using the base Russian commander. If you want to see more on it, I cover it in detail in the first part. And finally, I want to take a look at the armor viewer. Note that the Pyotr the Great is extremely tanky, 75mm to 180mm bow armor there. Nothing is going to penetrate that so long as you're facing it bow on. However, there is 19mm on the deck above the bow. 19mm can be overmatched by a lot of battleship guns at the tier, so if they come in from on high, they will penetrate that. Likewise, the side is very, very heavily armored, so if you're angling, you're going to be ricocheting all the battleship shells at the tier. But the Pyotr does have a weakness. If you're sailing away from enemy battleships, you do need to be careful, because they can penetrate this 19mm on the stern quite easily, and they can also penetrate that section right here with the 25mm pretty easily if you're facing away from them. And also, with respect to angling, you need to make sure you keep angled because this citadel is exposed, and if you don't angle very well, then you're going to get wrecked really quickly. So the Pyotr will be a bit of a challenging ship to play, but also a pretty rewarding one if you angle it properly. And now, in the first part of this Naval Boot Camp series, I did recommend the Russian battleship line for new players. I don't know if this is a controversial suggestion, but I should say that since we focused on staying alive in the first video of this series, what you should do is not just play the Russian battleships. You should also be playing all the other Tier 3 battleships if you're just starting out, you know? And focus on staying alive in all of those battleships, not necessarily just the Russian ones. Playing the other battleships will give you a good idea of what their strengths and weaknesses are, and likewise playing other classes of ships, such as the cruisers and destroyers, just getting behind the wheel of those things and taking them out for a spin, trying to figure out what to do is going to make you a better battleship player by giving you an idea of what those ships are capable of and what they aren't. So that's just one thing to get out of the way, but the main crux of this video, it's going to feature 2 battles. This one is going to end in defeat, and the second one is going to end in victory. In both of them, we want to be paying attention to the map and prioritizing our targets. So when we first load into a game, we're looking at the map. We're trying to figure out where are we spawned, what are the ships next to us, where are the enemies going to spawn, where are they likely to go, and where are most of our ships. Now, most of our ships are on the other side of the map, and from what we can tell just by looking at the map, most of the enemy ships are there too. In fact, our friendly carrier is spotting the enemy Matsuki inside this Bravo cap, and as I said in the first installment of this series, anytime you see a destroyer, you need to shoot at it. Destroyers are the biggest threat to you in a battleship, and they're the biggest threat to your team, particularly in a domination mode game like this. The capture circles are the objectives. And in a domination mode game, it should be your goal to either capture the objectives or protect the objectives that your team has captured. And you want to prioritize your targets. Now, what are battleships made for? Well, this salvo should give you an idea on this Tier 3 Italian cruiser. As you can see, it only took 1 salvo to kill him. That was a devastating strike, and I think that was the first blood medal for us. The battleship's primary target is the cruiser. Now, this game sort of has a rock, paper, scissors type dynamic to it between at least the three classes of surface ships. Now, obviously, there's a lot of nuance to this, and I'm oversimplifying it, but generally, the battleship is a hard counter to the cruiser and to other battleships. The cruiser is a hard counter to the destroyer, and the destroyer is a hard counter to the battleship. So it's sort of like a rock, paper, scissors sort of setup, and since you, as the battleship, are the hard counter to the cruiser is your priority target. Anytime you see a cruiser and you have a shot on it, you should be taking it, and oftentimes you will be rewarded, especially if the cruiser is broadside, by dev striking them and removing them from the board. Now, if you do that, the cruiser is not around to counter your friendly destroyers, which means they're going to have an easier time getting into the capture circles or getting out into an open part of the map to spot targets for you, whatever it is. If there are less cruisers around, it makes your destroyer's job easier, which in turn makes it easier for you to win the game. So, cruisers are your number one priority, and then battleships are your second priority, especially broadside battleships like this. Again, you don't want to give broadside ever to a battleship in your battleship because that can happen. That Wyoming was perfectly capable of doing the same thing to me if I were going to give broadside to him, but I was angled instead. Now, we're keeping an eye on that map. That Congo has our broadside, so we always have to be aware of that. And we want to turn away. It doesn't look like the Congo has noticed us, but we don't want to sail broadside to him and get complacent. If we do that, he could easily turn his guns and shoot us and do the same thing to us that we just did to the Wyoming. Plus, we've got this Königsberg over here, and we'd like to hit him. Now, we do hit him, and you'll notice that the results are not the same as the ones we got on the Tier 3 Italian cruiser a little bit earlier. That is because cruisers are pretty lightly armored, particularly at Tier 4. And sometimes, with high-caliber armor-piercing shells, you'll shoot them at a lightly armored target, and they will penetrate the armor, but they'll do what's called over-penetration damage, and that's what those 5 shell ribbons were right there. Those were the overpens. Now, the overpen means that the armor-piercing shell penetrated the armor, and it did not arm, but instead went right through the armor, right through the ship, and only did 10% of its maximum possible damage. You only get 10% damage of your maximum possible damage on AP shells for overpens, and basically you don't want overpens, but you will get them a lot of the time on lightly armored targets like cruisers and sometimes even on battleships. What you're looking for are the full penetration damage and the citadel hits. Now, unfortunately, we made a bit of a mistake here. We wanted to keep angled to that Congo, but we've gotten too close to the island, and the Königsberg has torpedoes. So he was able to come around, he was able to hit us with the torpedoes, and he did quite a bit of damage. Now we are in a lot of trouble, actually, and we're going to lock our guns to the starboard side of the ship in anticipation of the Königsberg coming back around the island. Still looking at the map, doesn't seem like we have to worry about that Congo too much. Note that there is an island between us and him, and that should be protecting us, so we should just be able to focus on the Königsberg here. As far as looking at the map, you also want to pay attention to the islands. Islands are not just for cruisers to hide around, they're also for battleships. They can protect you if you move next to them from battleships on other parts of the map, and that can contribute to helping you stay alive. And if you're watching the map, you can sometimes get into a position, and this should be your goal, where you've only got one enemy ship, maybe 2 at the most, that are actually capable of shooting at you. So now we should be able to take out this Königsberg quite easily, although he is turning around the other way, which makes me wonder whether he has torpedoes up again. We really don't want to stick around to find out, because I think a single torpedo from this guy could take us down. So we want to pull over here. We are giving broadside to the Königsberg. Even cruisers you don't necessarily want to give broadside to in battleships, But the cruisers are not going to citadel you, although they're armor piercing if they choose to shoot it at your broadside, at the upper belt or the superstructure. It can sometimes do a hefty amount of damage, and you do want to be careful of it. Now the Königsberg gets away, and at this point, this game is looking pretty doomed. It's 2 ships on the blue team versus 5 ships on the red team. The red team has 2 destroyers. We've only got the friendly aircraft carrier and myself. So we're not going to have a good time for the rest of this game. It's going to be particularly difficult to win. Potentially doable if I hadn't lost all my hit points to the Königsberg's torpedoes. But as it stands, things are not going to be looking good. So we're shooting at this König, I think it is, right there. And we're also going to try to shoot at this Jaguar, who is being spotted by the friendly aircraft carrier. Now, he's kind of far away. Might be a little bit difficult to hit him. Nevertheless, we're going to try. Again, always shoot at destroyers when they're spotted, even if you don't hit him. See, we did hit him there. Wasn't for a lot of damage, but he's not getting any of those hit points back. And we reset his progress on that capture point, at least for a little bit of time. Now, though, we're going to focus on the König. The destroyer may or may not still be spotted, but context is key when you're choosing to shoot at targets. Now, I said that cruisers are your number 1 target, battleships number 2, and then always shoot at destroyers when you see them. But context is key. If you're 2 kilometers away from a König and a cruiser or a destroyer is spotted near you, well, this guy is obviously the biggest threat. He's the closest to you, so you're going to need to work on him first. So occasionally you'll find yourself in situations where there are ships closer to you that may be harder for you to kill, like a battleship versus a cruiser, but the battleship, due to its position, is more of a threat to you than the cruiser. And if that happens, well, then you got to focus on the battleship. Unfortunately, we're being focused down here not only by the König, but also by his teammates, and we're the last ship left alive. So we are going to die here pretty soon, and the game is going to end with our defeat, but that's okay. We've done quite a bit of damage. We've focused on the targets we needed to focus on. Unfortunately, our team couldn't really provide us with much assistance. They all died far too quickly, but sometimes that's just going to happen. You're only 1 ship. You only have so much control over the game. Nevertheless, I think we finished top on the leaderboard there. 3 kills, 1,400 XP. Certainly not a bad game. Now, this game is going to illustrate looking at the map and paying attention to the map even more than the first one. In fact, we're going to win this game, and I think in retrospect, after having watched it again, part of the reason we win this game is because of our map awareness. So again, we're starting off, and we're looking at the map immediately. We're evaluating our team. We're seeing where our destroyer's located. He's on the other side of the map. We've got a couple battleships with us. We already see that one battleship is spotted in the northern part of the map up there. He's out of our firing range. And this is something you want to pay attention to on the map as well. The white circle around your ship, you can see it extends out very far. And on one part of it, it's got a little icon that looks like the guns. That is your gun range. And if anything's inside that white circle, like that New York or this Wyoming, it means you can shoot at it. And then the blue circle is your concealment range. Now, if any enemy ship is inside that blue circle on the minimap, they're going to spot you. If they're outside of it, they're not going to spot you. If you get spotted by something you can't see, and there's nothing inside of the blue circle on the minimap, no red ship that is, well, then you can assume that you're being spotted by a destroyer or potentially by a fairly stealthy cruiser. Now, we're looking at the minimap. It looks like this Karlsruhe is the only ship on this side of the map. Nevertheless, we're turning away. We don't know the location of the enemy destroyer. And since a lot of the enemy ships are up on the other side of the map, you can see about 4 of them up there in the northeastern corner of the map. We can assume that the destroyer is probably somewhere on this side of the map, or at least I think he is. And this is something you want to pay attention to, again, is the destroyers. It can save your life and tell you whether you can be more aggressive or whether you need to hang back depending on where the destroyer's at. Now, we don't actually notice this, but the destroyer appears right there on the map. We notice it a second later. We weren't looking at the map because we were shooting at the cruiser, but immediately we look back at the map, we see the destroyer there, and instantly we launch into an evasive maneuver because we know he's launched torpedoes at us. And by doing that, we're able to dodge those torpedoes. Again, looking at the map, it can save your life. Sailing in not straight lines, that's how you dodge torpedoes. Now, interesting thing happening. The destroyer has smoked up. The destroyer was spotting us, and since he's inside of his smoke, he cannot spot us. The smoke screen on a destroyer will conceal them from you. That is, you won't be able to spot them. But it will also conceal you from them if they don't have anybody with eyes on you. And as you can see, all of the enemy ships are outside of our blue detection circle on the mini-map. And now we're looking at the map. We notice that we've got 3 battleships sort of right in front of us moving in a line. And we've got an enemy cruiser and an enemy battleship up there to the west of the enemy base. Plus, the destroyer is behind us somewhere, but we don't want to push into that destroyer. The Izokazi has very good torpedoes that reload very, very quickly, and if we push into him, there's a big risk we're going to die. So we're going to leave our teammates to it, and we're going to go over to the other side of the map. Why? Well, because only the friendly destroyer is over there, and he's got a cruiser, 1 battleship, and I think another battleship hot on his tail. So if he's a new and experienced player, he might be able to deal with them. Or a new player, he might not be able to deal with them. He might be too inexperienced. He might get spotted. He might get killed. Luckily, the enemy destroyer there is fairly inexperienced, and he comes out and gets killed instantly. But we don't want to leave our destroyer alone. We want to support him. The battleship is, I would say, the tank support class in this game. And you should be supporting your destroyers because they're the ones that spot the enemy ships for you. They're the ones that go after the capture circles. And once again, we're looking at our targets there. We see a low-health Pyotr the Great, who we could finish off pretty easily, but we also see a Marblehead. Now, the Marblehead is a cruiser with fast-firing guns, very dangerous to our destroyer should he catch him. However, we are going to shoot at the Pyotr, I guess, and not the Marblehead, because it does look like the Marblehead's going to move behind that island, and we're probably not going to have a good time hitting him. Now, we hit the Pyotr for a little bit of damage. We're pointing our bow at him, so his return salvo to us actually does more damage. It comes in from the top and hits the light deck armor, where it penetrates and does a little bit of damage. Closer you are to enemy battleships in the Pyotr the Great, the tankier you are. Again, if you're further away, their AP can come in from the top and really kind of penetrate some parts of your deck armor pretty harshly there. But the Marblehead's coming around the corner. We're going to have an excellent shot on him now. He's giving us flat broadside. All the guns are loaded. The shot is out. And the Marblehead is no longer a threat to the friendly destroyer. We're able to take him out. And then we've just got this Pyotr the Great to deal with. So we recognized on the map that this flank was going to be overrun by the Pyotr the Great and the Marblehead. Only our destroyer was here. If we had not come back this way, this Marblehead and the Pyotr would have potentially gotten into the base and started capping it, and that is what we want to avoid. Now, as we wait for the Pyotr to come around the corner, we look into the map. We see the Karlsruhe out inside of the enemy base. We take a shot at him. Results aren't great, but we have to turn our attention away now and focus on the enemy Pyotr. Again, we're angled toward him. He does a bit of damage, takes out one of our turrets there temporarily. This is another module damage where you can use your damage control to repair it. But note that the secondary guns are firing at the Pyotr from our ship, and his secondary guns are firing at us. Those could light a fire. We don't want to use our damage control. And besides, the friendly destroyer comes in clutch there. That just leaves this Wyoming and I think 2 enemy cruisers left. Now the Wyoming is coming down this side of the map. I kind of thought when I was looking at the map earlier, he might have been pushing with that Pyotr and with that Marblehead, but he was not. Nevertheless, we came over to this side of the map because we noticed it could use our help. The 3 battleships pushing up to the base, it wouldn't have made sense to have a 4th one go with them when all these enemy ships were on the other side of the map. So coming around here to this side of the map, we play a huge influential role on our team. We really help them win by shoring up this side of the map, and that is the power of a battleship. It deals in big alpha strikes like this, another citadel on a broadside Wyoming. Use those alpha strikes to take out those cruisers and punish broadside battleships. Your presence on the map, it can be a huge deterrent to the enemies to push, and we've come here, and with our presence we have stopped the push of the Pyotr, the Marblehead, and to an extent this Wyoming, although this Wyoming is pretty slow. Now there are only 2 ships left alive, the Wyoming and the enemy aircraft carrier. It's not going to be too long before we take out the Wyoming, and note we are always keeping an angle toward him. We're never giving broadside. We're only turning to get all of our guns on target when they are reloaded, and then we are tightening up our angle again as they are reloading, and we're not giving the Wyoming broadside. We're not going to make it easy for him to shoot us. Now, he does take out the friendly destroyer there, but once again, he's turning around. He's turning to get all of his guns on target. Our guns are about to be reloaded, and we're going to take him out with this salvo. There he goes. That's our 2nd kill of the game. We're up to 97,000 damage. We get the high caliber medal, and all that's left is the enemy aircraft carrier. Now, we're not going to be able to catch up to that aircraft carrier and actually shoot at him, I don't think. I think actually we might be able to do that. But this game is essentially over. We've won. And I think the 2 of these games together give you a good indication of, looking at the map and selecting the targets that you actually want to shoot at. So, to tie it all together between the first installment of Naval Boot Camp and this one, we're going to focus on staying alive when we first start out in battleships. We're going to focus on our angling against enemy battleships. We're going to focus on not sailing in straight lines when we think there is a destroyer present, and we're going to be looking at the map always, constantly. When we first start the game, we're going to look at the map. We're going to see where our team is. We're going to try to guess where they're going. We're going to keep an eye out for red ships. When they get spotted, we're going to respond to it. And we're going to be looking to select our targets wisely. We're going to be trying to shoot the cruisers first. We're going to take them out so they're not threats to our destroyers. And we're going to shoot a destroyer anytime one is spotted. And then finally, we're going to shoot the battleships in order to counter them, particularly when they're giving broadside. But cruisers first, destroyers take precedent over anything when they're spotted, and then finally battleships last. Kill the cruisers, protect your destroyers. That is the primary goal of the battleship and the best guide to target selection possible. Now, looking at the map, very important though. Looking at the map is going to help you stay alive. It's going to help you know where to put your battleship to be most effective, as it helped us in this game. And it's a skill that you're going to want to practice constantly in all classes of ships. Everybody can probably improve their map awareness skills. I mean, you saw earlier in the game when the Izokaze tried to surprise torpedo me, he was appearing on the map before I actually noticed him and called it out on the screen. So, a little bit quicker reaction time, certainly something I could improve on, something you need to improve on too if you want to get good at this game and you want to get good at playing battleships. So, I hope that was useful to you. I think that is the conclusion of our beginner tips, talking about staying alive, angling, dodging torpedoes, and map awareness and target selection. Now that you've got that down, go out there in your Tier 4 battleship, whether it's the Pyotr or anything else. Try and put that into practice, and I will see you in the next episode of Naval Boot Camp, where we will focus on intermediate tips in the Tier 5 Russian battleship, the Ismail. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you aren't subscribed, you might consider doing that. We're getting very close to 4,000 subscribers, and that is excellent. Never thought I'd be here. But that's all for today. Thank you so much. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.